Hey guys, welcome to the Dude Seriously Show. As a part of our Road to Infinity War, we're going through each Marvel Cinematic Universe film in the order they were released and talking a little bit about them. I'm Johnathan.
Charles Conklin.
And we're here talking Marvel. So for today's episode, we're talking about The Incredible Hulk. Now this was the second film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We had Iron Man at this point, and now this. And they're a little bit loosely connected. There's some Easter eggs. Film doesn't do a ton of world building, but we'll get into that. So what'd you think of The Incredible Hulk?
So in a word, it's not bad.
That's not a word, that's two words, but I'll give it to you. It's good. It's good. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. That's how you sum it up.
Yeah.
You had talked a little bit about the pre-production of this film.
Right. Yeah. It had a uphill battle from the pre-production phase, in that originally it was planned as a sequel and a reboot, which is a weird kind of place to start. But somewhere late in the pre-production phase, as they're going into filming, that was when they joined up with Marvel's Gamble for this independent studio, Marvel Studios. You know, that's why it's kind of funny, like a lot of the stuff from the early planning phase had to stay, like for the fact that the film, the first setting of the film is in South America, because Ang Lee's Hulk ends with Banner hiding out in South America. So that's kind of how that happened, but it was still pretty cool.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to talk about this film as a part of the MCU because, yes, it is a part of the MCU. You know, Tony Stark shows up in our post-credit scene, which to me is the best part of the film.
Yeah.
And, you know, everything that we can talk about in this film is self-contained, you know, because this film really does stand on its own. And I think that pre-production issue is kind of what comes back to it. Something that I laugh about in this film is all of a sudden Hulk likes to use gloves. You know,
the cars, the car gloves, it was just,
it's something different.
It was just something, I think, a visual cool thing to throw in there. But yeah, it was. I mean, it was kind of cool to see the cars flying apart and the engine pieces. But I mean, does it really enhance his fighting skills? I mean,
not really. But yeah, so there's lots of interesting things in this film. I think that the CGI is lacking. I know some people that really like the CGI of the Hulk, but to me, it just looks very fake. And
to be fair, it was improved from Ang Lee's.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I mean, we at least have that going for us. Not even on the same planet, I don't think.
No.
But again, you know, I think that maybe that harkens back to a lot of the pre-production issues that we've stumbled into. And this is kind of partially why we had to recast the role, is that Ed Norton, world-class actor, actually does a fairly decent job in the movie, but he was also given a screenwriter's credit in this film.
Was he really?
Yeah. Some of the scenes, you know, were included in the film that he wrote, but I think he was upset that, you know, some of the cooler scenes that could have potentially tied into the larger universe were left out. Like, I believe the deleted scene is actually on the DVD where he's in the Arctic wilderness, or, you know, there's snow, and he gets angry and smashes the ice, and you kind of see a hint of a Captain America shield in the,
So that would have been a little cheesy.
It would have been a little cheesy because, I mean, obviously, at this point, when they were filming this, Captain America was on the docket, but there was no casting announced or anything like that. And honestly, it was still considered a pipe dream that everybody would come together at some point. That's why, you know, this is a standalone, you know.
Yeah, and think how amazed we would have been. Did you see Captain America's shield? Nice. Yeah, we would have lost our minds. But instead, we see that in Iron Man 2, which will, of course, be next week's episode. Right. The big thing, and you touched on it a little bit, is the recasting.
Yeah.
This is Ed Norton's only appearance as Banner / the Hulk in the MCU. And I know a lot of people that prefer Norton. I know a lot of people that prefer Ruffalo. Personally, I like Ruffalo a little bit better, and my rationale for that is not only because they match the CGI, where I see the Hulk and I believe that really is Mark Ruffalo as the Hulk.
Yeah.
Even in other films, you know, I always think of like 13 Going on 30, where he's the older, you know. I always think of that Mark Ruffalo when I think of the Hulk, because that Ruffalo is very similar. I mean, he's basically Bruce Banner without the anger management issues in that film. And Mark Ruffalo is in this film as well. I believe it's called Begin Again, where he plays this record producer who kind of sees his career going out of his grasp. Keira Knightley's in it. Adam Levine. Really interesting cast. But I think Ruffalo just has such great range. And, of course, we see him for the first time in Avengers. Whereas Norton, I think, plays a very conflicted Banner. In this film, it's good. This film is very introspective toward the character of Hulk. And, you know, in this movie, it's like the Hulk is seen as this weapon that they want to take away from Banner, and Banner wants to suppress it. And then Avengers picks up with that, and he ultimately accepts that the Hulk can be a weapon for good, even though, you know, when he uses Hulk in this, when he falls out of the helicopter for the final battle, he, you know, he's going into battle to save people, but he's not going into battle thinking that, you know, I'm going to be the Hulk forever. You know, I'm not going to make a career out of being the Hulk. And he goes, at the end, into isolation to tame it and learn a little bit more. But that said, I mean, they're both really different takes on the character.
Very different. I'm one of those that I like them both because exactly what you said, they both bring different qualities. Obviously, this film was intended to be like a love letter to the old series from the late 70s, early 80s.
We even get that scene where he's walking with the old music.
Yeah, with the old music. And the introduction, which is probably the coolest thing in the whole movie, is, you know, the opening sequence is definitely a love letter. It's kind of like the reboot because we get to see how he becomes the Hulk, and the machinery matches the old TV show stuff. So that was really that's really cool, and they were going for that fugitive type aspect that the show had.
So Liv Tyler's in this film.
Oh yes,
plays Betty Ross. Really great.
Really good performance.
We'll probably never see her again in the MCU.
Sadly, and that's
really
a shame.
No reason to because Bruce Banner goes off and finds new love with Black Widow. Banner has the heart rate monitor.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I think that scene where they get intimate and he, you know, it's not really like a fanboy scene of like, oh, you know, they're getting intimate. I think that's a really interesting way to show how the Hulk affects Banner.
He's got to keep everything on the level.
Everything. I mean, he can't. You know, imagine if he gets frustrated in rush hour traffic, if he stubs his toe. So I think it really is an interesting way to build those two characters' relationship, but at the same time really show the limitations that Banner has because of the condition of the Hulk living within him. So speaking of Ross, her father, Thaddeus Ross, is one of the antagonists of this film, who's played by William Hurt. And if you would have told me we'd see him again, I would have been surprised. But he shows up in Captain America: Civil War.
I was both surprised and thrilled that he came back up because William Hurt's a terrific actor, another world class. And so casting him as Thunderbolt Ross was a brilliant move, and so glad that they get to bring him back and have him come full circle. Honestly, you know, the thing about the Hulk in the comics is his catalog of villains isn't the best. And here's the irony. The first two films for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Iron Man and Incredible Hulk, neither one have a real strong catalog of villains. And Marvel has, especially with Iron Man, they've done a really good job of raising subpar characters into, you know, characters that are at least tolerable and you can appreciate them. But in this film, the only real villains in Hulk's catalog are all either created, mentioned, or appear. You know, because we have Ross, who is, of course, the ultimate antagonist for the Hulk. And then the only physical threat to Hulk, Abomination. So we can talk about Abomination all night because...
Before we jump into Abomination, you said all three of his villains. The last one being Mr. Blue in the film, who...
Exactly.
You know, you see his head expand to be the leader.
Professor Stearns.
So it was an interesting thing. We'll probably never see him.
And that's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, he would have been. He was great in this film.
He was fantastic. He would be an interesting spin, but sadly, we'll probably never even see him in Abomination either, which is kind of a shame, because I mean he's can be an interesting character.
So with Abomination, we're actually given a reference outside of this film what he's up to these days.
Right.
Agent Coulson mentions that he's in a containment unit
In Siberia.
So he could come back.
It would, and that would be cool if they could bring him back. But it's nice to know that he's out there somewhere and could potentially cause a problem down the road.
It'd be interesting to see if in isolation, if he's grown or how he's changed, and of course,
If he's had any access to the weight room.
well, of course, he'd have better CGI, is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah,
That's how he
absolutely.
would change, but
Yeah.
I imagine he'd be a little bigger and bulkier.
Yeah.
Tim Roth is an amazing actor.
Sure, absolutely.
But I feel like Abomination is just very cartoonish in this film.
He kind of got the scrap because, essentially he is an abomination because he's a combination of failed attempts of the super soldier serum to replicate the super soldier serum.
I alluded that this is personally probably my least favorite MCU film, just being honest.
Initially, it was probably one of my favorites, but that's because I had a bad taste in my mouth from Ang Lee's Hulk, and
Initially, this was one of my favorites. Back when it was only this and Iron Man 2.
right. And again, it was this movie had the official first crossover because with Tony Stark in that great scene.
Stark. General. You always wear such nice suits.
Touche. I hear you have an unusual problem.
You should talk.
You should listen. What if I told you we were putting a team together?
Who's we?
We'll talk about this next week, but it's interesting because Iron Man 2 is just, hey, boom, the Avengers, boom, hey, we're getting the team together, boom. You have War Machine suit up, you have Black Widow, you have Captain America's shield pop up.
It's like the Marvel Universe just went.
Yeah, with the next film.
Yes.
And then it tones back for Thor.
Right.
It's some references.
Right.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And then Captain America really is like, okay, we're going to bring these things together.
Right.
And then, of course, Avengers.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to do the Avengers episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. It's part of the MCU, and we're on the road to Infinity War. So it's good to go back and look at these films and just take them for what they are.
Right.
All of these films add a different flavor.
They do.
And take a film like Doctor Strange against this. Very different
Very,
films.
very different.
But they both add to this universe in different ways, and that's something that we should really celebrate and appreciate.
And I think that's one of the things that out of the gate even Marvel was doing right is that we have all these different genres, and they're all superhero films. And so it's a beautiful thing, and they've done it masterfully and artfully.
It's a great point. We have these, the overarching genre is superhero film, but inside of those we have different ones. I'm not sure what you would classify this as.
It's kind of a fugitive action film, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. But, some of them stick out a little bit easier, like, Spider-Man Homecoming being this love letter to, 80s John Hughes kind of films.
Right.
Ant-Man being a heist film.
Right.
Captain America the Winter Soldier being a political thriller.
Yep.
So, it's just great. That's a great point to bring up. So with that, we're going to bring this episode to a close, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been a great episode of the Dude Seriously Show. And we'll see you next week for our review of Iron Man 2. Thanks for joining us on the road to Infinity War. Dude Seriously, we'll see you on the next one. There's just some really unique and fun world building that goes on in this film.
Charles Conklin.
What?